Welcome, everyone. Let us now move on to the next panel session for today, titled Reimagining Investments and Business Through the Creative Industry, moderated by Mr. Mohan Lau, Director, Digital Creative Content, Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation. Over to you, Mr. Mohan.
Thank you. Thank you. And welcome to today's talk, panel session. And I'd like to start off by probably getting to know our panelists a bit better. So maybe we can start off by talking about a bit about DC and Zeno's backgrounds a bit. So these two are they're pioneers in this digital content industry, and hope to get to hear a lot more about what you guys are going to be sharing about today. So maybe let's start off with DC and a bit about yourself.
Okay. Hello guys. I'm from Penang. I'm DC Gan, and I'm the co-founder of Magnus Game Studio. So we start off as an indie game studio where we have around four person in the team. We had our own idea of making games, and then we thought that hey, why not we just work on something that we like, because I think that was many years ago. We learned a lot of things from googling it, and testing it out ourselves, and then we doesn't really have a proper team. But then slowly when we work on the games, we look for investors, and we saw a lot of challenges, and then that is where we start to learn about the importance of working out a pitch deck, a business deck, and then where should we get fundings, and until today we have grown to more than 40 developers in the team, including all the 2D artists, 3D artists, concept artists, animators, and programmers. So we're working on our own IP called Reimagining, and it is going to be on PlayStation 4, 5, Nintendo Switch, and also on Steam and Xbox, of course. Yeah. So we are preparing the launch and also working on some of our few smaller new IPs as well. Yeah. So, yep, we are Malaysia born, locally, and homegrown game studio. Thank you.
Awesome. Definitely want to hear more about that. And let's take a look at Mr. Zeno and his awesome animation studio. Yeah.
Hi everyone. Yeah, hi. My name is Zeno, and I'm from Giggle Garage, based here in Cyberjaya in Malaysia. We started the company about 11 years ago, so it's really about creating our own original content. The idea from the team in our development department, and try to produce that into something that we can export to the rest of the world. We do that by either doing it our own or by looking for investors or co-producers from other countries. So far, we have done several co-investment, co-production with Australia, with South Korea, with countries in Europe like Germany or UK, in creating contents that can be distributed to the kids and families around the world. So we are still doing that now. It has been really fun, and looking forward to the rest of the session. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right. So let's just talk about in general what are opportunities, right, in the digital creative space. So DC, you work on games, and Zeno, you work on animation, right? So just feel free to share what's awesome about this industry, and what are the opportunities then for potential investors or people that want to start out in this space. Yeah. Zeno, you want to take this? Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Well, what's interesting about animation, right? I'll talk a bit about what is really exciting for us at this moment, which is basically the explosion of the OTT platforms, right? And it's still growing. It's going to continue to grow. I mean, that's what we are actually foreseeing it. It's really an exciting period. I was reading earlier a report from Research Dive, right? they're projecting that the global market for OTT in the next 5 years will grow from about 100 billion to 400 billion. I mean, that's like almost 20% growth year on year. Yeah. So definitely very exciting. And I think we are at a time where there's a lot of factors that are supporting this growth. And for producers like us to be in this kind of climate, definitely something that we look forward to because there's a lot of opportunities around it, right? One of the factors is like the content now is basically available to all segments of the audience. I mean, if we compare that to the early stage of distribution, for example, like Netflix, when they were probably looking at just having a niche content for niche area, niche audience. But with the OTT, that totally has changed. You basically can create content that access all the masses, and you can still have a niche content by conducting localization. You know, we have a local IP, local content that is able to travel globally. So definitely that's something that really exciting for us at the moment, to be able to play a part, creating a Malaysian content right here in Malaysia, but then somebody else in the States or in Latin America are able to watch that and basically subscribe and returning back some money to the investors. I think it's really an exciting time.
Yeah, so there's new opportunities in terms of even niche products going global, and that's so how has it really impacted your company? Has it changed the way you do business? Has it provided new opportunities again in this space? Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, in terms of being able to reach multiple segments of the geographies, I think first there's an opportunity of reach, right? The second one is the opportunity to really showcase the high quality production that we have in Malaysia. And of course we still have to invest on certain production capability that able to produce all this. I mean, one of our show that we just actually completed entirely during the COVID period, from last year until April this year. That show is, within like 3 months of its production is now shown on 60 countries. So that's one of the example of co-production that we have done. That I think benefit from this ample distribution platform. And I think companies, in Malaysia, animation studios in Penang, in KL, or in Sabah, I think that it's a lot of opportunity to take up.
Awesome. What about the game side? Yeah, DC. How is this new opportunities, right, in the games industry, open and available, right, for people to come in and explore. Yeah.
I think the biggest change that we have seen through the past few years is the globalization scale. Because many years ago, when we started making games, there were not so many opportunities or so many ways to talk to people from different countries or distribute your game in different regions. And but recent years, there's a lot of programs, and it is easier to access bigger distributors. Like for us, we are very lucky to work with 55 Games, which is a subsidiary of a listed company in Italy. So we are working with them, and we are distributing our IP in a global scale. And I think this is more like a lot of people are thinking like, maybe I have a team of 6, I have a team of 8. Maybe I'm too small to go globalization, but I think like what Zeno said, now opportunity is everywhere, and it is very easily to tap on those markets. Like and a lot of people might not know that how to sell your games, but if you have the right partnership in the gaming industry, they can help you with fundings, they can help you with all the marketings, and also how or where to sell your game. So those platforms are something that is very important. Like in China, they have their own game selling platforms. If you're on iOS or mobile, and for the foreign countries. We have Steam, Humble Bundle, so many different kind of platforms that we can tap on to sell a game, even if you are a small team. Because in fact, we signed our first publishing deal where we only have like 8 people in the team. So it is a lot easier to tap onto this market nowadays compared to early days. So yeah, and the market is so huge. It's so huge. Like what Zeno said, we are looking at hundreds of billions in US dollars of the market cap. Yeah, so it is something that beneficial to smaller or smaller countries like Malaysia to tap on to the global market.
Yeah, I think yeah, there are definitely a lot of opportunities. I mean, I can probably speak more from the game side of things. Like especially 10 years ago, and where we are today. The markets have grown. The channels of distributions have grown. The access to knowledge and technology has also gotten better. So I think it's a great place to be in. In fact, I think definitely these are the digital content consumption is not slowing down, especially now with the COVID and everything. In fact, it's increased. So great opportunities ahead. So let's take a step back and I'm a lot more familiar with DC's funding journey and he had a very successful Kickstarter and then went on to get equity funding and so forth. And I know you guys work on a lot of co-production deals. So probably we can now segue into like how are you guys funding your businesses and in terms of equity or in terms of project financing. And what are lessons that you've learned from those maybe. Yeah. So feel free to for any one of you to share. Yeah.
Okay. So I think from our end, it all started with passion. I think everyone started this industry or this so-called entrepreneurship of journey through their passion. So we were kids. We don't know anything about fundings. We doesn't know how important it is to get to do a financial projection or how do we pre-plan financial route for the company. So we're just we make games, let's do it. So we were passionate about making games until a certain point we know that hey, this is a serious business. So that is where we need fundings, we need planning. So that is where we learn about the importance of pre-planning, about fundings and what are available in the industry. And that is where we started to Google, look around locally and also in the international market. And because we tried a lot of local kind of pitchings, but we failed to get fundings in the beginning because they were laughing at us, saying that your ideas are big, but then it is very not realistic enough because there is no success story here in Malaysia for games. Hence, we have no choice, but we have to look elsewhere. We go Google, we find alternative fundings, and then we came across with a platform called Kickstarter. It is based in US, and it is a public crowdfunding platform. So we're thinking, hey, why not? Since we need fundings and we should try any opportunities that came by. So that is where we started our own campaign. Me and my younger brother, we know nothing about business in the beginning. Then we started our pitch. It was 38 days campaign. So within that 1 month, we have managed to secure almost 2 million ringgit of public fundings through our own IP and ideas. So that is where we give ourselves more confidence in saying that, no matter what people are telling us, even if we are small, we have a small team, but if we have the ambition and we have the vision of making a fun game, because recipe of making games and animation, I believe it shares almost the same recipe, which is making a fun game, which is a fun content, and then people like it. People either laugh or cry or or they attach to that IP itself. So when we saw a lot of mainstream medias starting to talk about the game, then a lot of tractions came in, and within 24 hours, we have hit our targeted amount of fundraising amount. I mean, so we were really excited and happy, and we thought that, hey, you know, it is the beginning, and we were happy. And after the end of the campaign is where we learned that having a startup funding is only the beginning. You know, after you run through a few years of business, you know, that amount will keep you alive for a while. But what if the sales doesn't come in? You know, what if the partnership doesn't work out? You know, what if there's delays here and there? And if you are talking about a bigger studio, the burn rate is 6 figures every month. So that is what we are doing. So then we learn another story, which is we learn what is called a real fundraising. Through the Kickstarter, we learn about how to get our first initial kind of funding to kickstart to fund the project. And we are lucky to be the most funded Kickstarter project in Southeast Asia back then. And then after we have that amount of money, we were thinking, okay, now we are rich, right? We have that amount of money, so we can do a lot of things. And then, okay, we start to plan, we expand the team, and then we found out that, okay, we got to the quality we wanted, and we got a number of people that is needed. And what's next? Oh my God, the burn rate. Yeah, this is, I think this is what a lot of people have gone through. But I think through that experience, we have learned a lot of things from the foreign partners, because we have signed a deal with our foreign partners. So that is where we get another fundings, which is a couple million ringgit for as a so-called loyalty-free fees, and also for the minimum guarantees that partners are giving us. So this is also one of the so-called the product funding. So the production fundings that we get from our partnerships. And then after that, we know that okay, that is not enough, because we have talents to feed. Especially we are cultivating our local talents, which I think they are very, very talented. And then after all these smaller fundings is where we start to look into equity fundings, where the real expenditure of the studio, the company is heading towards. And that is where I learned about how to write a pitch deck, you know, how to talk on a language that investors want to hear, and all those kind of things are very lacking in the local industry. As not only, I think, not only for the creative media side, but also for the investment side. We don't have a lot of opportunities, or a lot of VCs or private investor that really understands about the business. How does this kind of entertainment business works? So it took us a lot of talking, you know, pitching. I think we pitch more than 50-60 companies a year, just to try to get fundings. And in the end, we did we closed our Series A with a very good amount, and also a very good investor who is still with us today, and they are supporting us with a lot of not only in the gaming side, financial side, but also for experience, and also for a lot more things, business opportunities. And hence that is how we can start to diversify and grow our team, other than just making games, but tapping into modern solutions, you know, R&D for technologies and stuff. So I think it was a very cruel journey, I would say. Every decision was life-threatening to the whole organization. And we were young, we might make wrong decisions, but thankfully we are lucky to have good guidance from a lot of people like MDEC, from industry experts, and our partners from overseas, who are giving us a lot of good opportunities. And of course, it was a learning lesson. If we think about it, we don't really know that making games costs that much money in the first place when we started. You know, with all the overdues and all the localizations, we're working with more than 10 languages, and then we're distributing it to to the global industry with China, Korea, Japan, the Europe countries, and yeah, so those are really good experiences. But I think funding is one of the most challenging part when you are growing, and when you're growing at a stage where you are no longer a small team, and grants or financial aids of 50,000, 100,000 will not do any good to your team anymore. So when you have surpassed that kind of a level, that is where you will see that it is not so much of opportunity there. Banks will not talk to you because this is a new industry.
Yeah.
When they ask you about professions, you can't even find a game developer in that that tab. So they don't understand, and there are a lot of challenges here and there. But in the end, we are happy that we are quite blessed with what we have now. Yeah.
It sounds good. It's a long journey.
Yep.
And a great experience. Sounds like you've taken this long walk. I think let's hear from Zeno right now. And how his journey has been. In terms of getting himself funded and getting to this point. Take it away, Zeno.
Yeah, thank you. Well, when we started the company, I think the first 1 year was really to look at where we can actually have, cash flow fund next year or the subsequent years. So we were fortunate because we actually working on a service project from Al Jazeera Children. So we were working on that in the first year. And at the same time, we used the fund available from that to actually create our own development team to work on our first original. So when we work on the first original, we basically was supported under conditional loan from MDEC and also the facility financing from MDEC. So we work on the show Organimals, that's 100% done in Malaysia by the Malaysian team. And now it's actually available to more than 100 countries. So we were so proud of that project. It's our first project, right? But then again, we were thinking like, okay, what's next? How do we, basically fund the next production? And one way that we look at is to find partners or investors, right? And back then, obviously, like what DC mentioned, it's very tough. I think it's almost none. Well, it was none, right? Private investors that going to invest on animation content. So this is like 7, 8 years ago, right? So what we did was we went to the market organized by MDEC in South Korea and also in Cannes, and met a few producers back then, and we basically managed to partner as a co-producer with one company in South Korea, which I think is really critical because that's being a young company, 2 years old company, right? We didn't know anything about international production. So what that did to us was to basically introduce how co-production works, how do we structure financing from multiple partners in different countries. And I think most importantly, we learn what is the best technology, best pipeline to create a global production. Because the company that we partner with was, they had been doing it for like 10 years prior to us. They work with Disney, with Cartoon Network. So they had that technology, and we basically said, hey, I want to partner with you, but then you have to teach us how to do it, right? So that's how we actually get not only the co-production funding, but also, the way how to make things better compared to what we learned, what we knew back then. And basically, moving on from that onwards, I think it's almost 100% of our project are actually equity financing for project-based. So it's all on a project-based financing. So I was mentioning earlier that we had a project that completed early this year. So that was actually a TV series that was financed in Australia by private investor as well as broadcaster in Australia. In Malaysia, we we basically had the support of the FINI program from FINAS that financed some portion of the production. And we also have distributors in Germany, as well as broadcaster in Germany that provide the advance payment or minimum guarantee, or distributors advance that we can take in and put as part of the production. So all these are, there are multiple ways now to structure the financing in order for us to greenlight the production. So that's basically, the things that we are doing now. And like what you said, one of the first co-production was with South Korea. That project was actually funded by the government of Korea, the broadcasters in Korea, the broadcasters in, the public broadcasters in Korea, as well as, we had the creative loan in Malaysia to fund it as well. So there are multiple ways to fund it. I think, like what DC said, producing an animation content, let's say if we want to produce not only a movie, but let's say a 13-hour series, right? 52 episode of 11 minutes. Those takes time, and time definitely is money in this case, right? Because it costs a lot. We have to be able to make sure that the production is fully funded before we start production. I think that's where, some of the difficulties in the past where companies basically just go into production without really securing the financing. So I think that's going to land people in trouble. So that's some sharing of our previous journey.
Yeah, great stories. Both from both Zeno and DC. Makes me wonder, right? Like how do we get information about this funding? If I was a new studio, right? Animation studio or game studio, right? Like where would I start? Because there's crowd, and this is just project financing, right? We're not even talking about equity yet. We're talking about project financing. You've got crowdfunding, and then you've got the project financing in terms of from incentives to distribution to minimum guarantees, upfront royalties, and there's just so many different mechanisms, right? Like what mechanisms, right, would be good for me to start out with if I was a new studio? Yeah.
If from the gaming side, I think the best thing to start will be contact MDEC, because there's a lot of okay. The reason why I say that is not because of any other personal reasons, but I have been mentoring a lot of game studios, partnering with MDEC, giving out I think something called the DC3. Used to be called DC3, and now I think they changed the name, right?
Used to be IPCC, and it's called DC3.
Yeah, IPCC then DC3, and then it is a finance or a grant of up to 50,000 or 100,000 for smaller and new studios to get a validation of their own ideas, I would say. So for those studios with new ideas or new kind of a team, I think this will be the best route to start with, because back then we doesn't have this kind of opportunities, and we were not exposed to this kind of grants or funds available in the industry, that we have missed it. So for a new company who wants to try or who wants to believe in the team, who has a very good design for the game, I think the best thing is to try to validate your idea, get them because through that program you get a mentor, and you get different exposure. And then for our own experience, speaking for Magnus Game Studio, and also from what we have learned, trade shows are important. Trade shows are very, very important, because that is where you get your contacts, your international contacts, talk to all the different partnerships or publishers or distributors from different business to business sessions. And then I think that is the first place where we should start. And that is how we get people to know about the IP. And when people know about IT, they will, at the IP, there will be interest. And when the interest comes, and that is where you can gauge the interest. If investors or partnerships or any distributors from the trade shows are giving interest, that which means there is at least some certain commercial values, right? So then you can plan for bigger funds, like go for a Kickstarter. Of course, in our case, from my experience, we will not touch much on the equity funding until later part, because because equity fundings means that someone is coming into your company. You have to understand that very well before you open up your equity for different partnership, because the first question is the value that you're asking for the company is what you want? How much can your company grow in the next 3 to 5 years? And these are some of the simple questions that you can ask. In return, maybe you can offer production equity, like what Zeno did, and where we get a bigger profit sharing for them, but keeping the company's equity untapped. So those are also one of the few scenarios that might be helpful for some new startups. Yeah.
Zeno, what are your thoughts?
Yep. Sure. I just, I agree completely with DC. I think you mentioned about, being a new studio and basically having an idea, right? I think the idea definitely needs to be validated, and how best to do that, MDEC or Finas, they basically have these missions to go to trade or networking markets, right? It's one way to go there and basically ask the industry, whether this is a good idea or what can be done. And then, that's how we started. That's how we actually got to know partners that interested in our IP to co-produce, right? So that's gonna, help you in terms of getting at least maybe 30-40% of the production to be funded by other partners, right? So that's one way. And I think in terms of private investors, like I said early on, it's I'm looking forward to the days which is actually now, I hope so, right? Where private investor will look at a story or a script and say, I want to own half of the IP. What is the production cost? This is the money. And unfortunately, maybe in 5 to 10 years, you'll get the money returned, because that's what is the time frame of animation production, right? It's not an annual year-on-year return. It's basically a long cycle process. So I think with having all this understanding from, investors, VC out there, this industry definitely is worth investing. It's at the most exciting time to invest in animation, right? I guess that's one way, yeah.
Is there 5 to 10 years sounds like a long time for an investment to come back. And I mean, typically for 5 to 10 years, I would imagine a very high returns, right? If I'm going to be waiting that long for money, right? So I'm just curious, yeah. Is there any way?
Well, let me give you some numbers, right? There is this TV series called Bluey. And we know the producers. We actually pitched together in Brisbane. That was in 2018. So we pitched another show, and they pitched another show, and obviously, I think for the case of Bluey, the production started back then, and then of course, it takes about at least 2 to 3 years to do the production for that TV series. Cost them about $10 million US, produce it. And now, which is like 3 years later, right? Or even the first year after the production, it becomes a global phenomenon for a kid show. The toys for this property become the #1 toys in US, and the toy manufacturer, which is the licensee for this brand, just projected that the annual global sales for this toy going to be 800 million. So from a 10 million become 800 million in 5 years. I think DC should be jumping at this, right? This is a great industry. And some of the previous, some numbers from before. For example, like the Cars, the story Cars, the movie, that was produced for about 20 million, and then it made a box office of 400 million US dollar. But then, the good thing about content or animation, you have all these verticals where you can get additional revenue from, from merchandising, sales of royalties, publication. Now in addition to the box office, the show went ahead and make another 1.2 billion in all these verticals. So it's going to be attractive for investors that looking or understanding this type of time frame. All right.
Yeah, that's very true. Like what Zeno said, I think a lot of investors are just looking at one item. Animation means they're looking at that animation content, and game means they're looking at the game content. A lot of people that we have spoken to, they doesn't understand how do you make money other than selling your animation, your game or movie box office, or selling your game online, the CD keys. So which I think Zeno spoken a very important point with all the merchandising, licensing for different kind of things. So whenever I meet a potential investors, they will always ask us one question: how do we make money other than selling games, or is this the only revenue stream? And that's why I think but when the problem is when we're giving them these numbers, they feel that it is not realistic, so we have to keep educating the investors. We have to keep educating them. Although the number looks big, but we are talking about globalization. So when we're talking about globalization, the numbers will be scary. Like how we did our first our Real Legends soft launch back in 2019. I think 1 month's revenue is near to 2 million. So for a very new studio, new company with a soft launch without a lot of marketing spend, I think those are showing us a potential, and hopefully in the future we will get more investor that is like what Zeno said. Hey, you got a good idea? How much do you need? Let's fund it. Let's make sure that we are cultivating the talents at the same time we are growing the industry. Yeah.
I think that marketing these days, there's a lot of creative ways to do marketing. Yeah, marketing money is still important, but the powers of influencers and social media and all this in play. But moving forward, what I've heard some of the challenges that that you guys are facing interwoven in all your stories, right? But really, what are some of the big challenges that you guys have been facing, or gaps, right? You think that the funding could be better, right, for the digital content industry? Yeah. Zeno, you want to take this first,
Yeah, sure. This is basically just an extension of what we shared earlier, right? In terms of our previous experiences and what do we see moving forward in terms of the availability of funding. So I think one of the key challenges is to make sure that investors basically know or understand that animation or creative industry funding is slightly different than the normal series funding, ABC. It's slightly different, and I alluded to that. I think one of the factors is the cycle in terms of the ROI. And I think that's one. The second one is, I know government agencies like MDEC or FINAS or other agencies, they definitely have been the biggest supporters for creative industry as part of the digital economy. you know, I think we still yet to see, you know, maybe a true unicorn content coming out of Malaysia, for example. You know, I think the agencies are supporting, let's say, the you know, I mean, especially throughout the COVID, right? We have different ranges of support from, let's say, 50,000, 300,000 ringgit, which is really, really good, right? And we all should be thankful to the government for that. I think what is missing is post-COVID, how are we going to get at least one or a couple of projects from the creative industries that really going to be out there, outside, that become another, you know, like I said just now, a bluey, right? How do we create another bluey for Malaysia? And I think that's where certain type of, you know, a partnership from private investors as well as from the government that willing to support a project on a bigger scale, you know, not 300,000, maybe in let's say 30% of the production cost, for example. I think that's where we would like to see, I think, coming moving forward.
Okay, so basically more awareness to fund it to the investors about, you know, how animation funding is, you know, the cycles around animations and the expectation and the return, as well as the icon, getting out a big icon project or flagship project coming out from Malaysia. So funding for something like that, right? That's what you're getting at. Noted. I think those are some interesting points. And we did, you know, like I think more than 10 years ago, create, I guess, Saladin. So we're looking for a new Saladin, a new updated Saladin project. Is it?
Exactly. I think the landscape has changed, the distribution has changed in terms of the business model, the revenue model that's totally different than 10 years ago. So I think that's, and you know, with all these new changes, it's also has all these, you know, I mean, probably something that's unknown to producers alone. I think we need to partner with different experts, let's say on the marketing side in this new type of distribution. You know, how do we actually generate new streams now from this brand? I think those are definitely different now compared to many years back.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. I think DC finish up on this question, and then I think we'll take questions from the audiences, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, sure. So I think the biggest challenge that we are facing, although we are talking about challenges here and there, you know, throughout the whole discussion, but I think the whole industry is still positive, I would say, compared to many years ago. And that's the reason why me or myself and Zeno is still in the industry. We are still trying to, you know, work hard, but we are trying to improve, and we're trying to share as much as we could so that we know that the industry is aware of the problems as well. Although we understand that we have discussed about what's the pros, and then to move things forward, I think we need to understand about the cons and what are we lacking now. I think back to the funding side, although a lot of people might say that, you know, grants, we shouldn't take grants for granted, you know, but then at the same time, I think the bigger the company is, the bigger the exposure of risk when you are starting a new IP. So even if you are a new startup or you are an established company, starting a new IP is still like something that is very challenging. You might fail. So it still needs support in certain ways. But I think what I see in industry is, which is lacking, is the categorization of a company size, I would say, the fund size, because there are new startups, you know, and then there are company who passed the startup stage, and there are company who have been successful for 1 or 2 IPs, so making the revenues of 1 million and above. So we don't really see a very clear segregation of different categories for companies. Hence, we have always seen a very good amount of fundings being fed into the industry, especially for the first category, where the startup categories. But once the startup have been through the startup segment, when you're in the second stage of incubation. And that is where we see a lot of lackings in facilities, because this is where you need more funding to grow. Maybe you're working on a second IP, but you are still waiting for a yield or a return from the first IP. Because like what Zeno have shared earlier, the whole incubation cycle might be long, but you can't wait until then to start your second IP, right? So when you're studying something, you definitely need a support of certain kind. But then when you look into the industry, you might see that there's very less opportunities, or there's very less fundings that's available for a category B size of company, where if you say you need a lot of money, but that is not a lot of money, but at the same time, it is not less. So which means that if you are looking about around 1 million or 2 million ringgit of fundings, that is where, for VCs, that's too small. But for private investors, for personal private investors, that might be too big of an amount. So that is where we see a lot of lacking of funding starting from second phase of a startup phase, I would say. So yeah, if we have that more, and private investors or VCs are willing to work together more linearly with the creative industry, I think it is easier for us to scale up and to tap onto a bigger market in the global industry. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, MDEC does have, from the DC3, which is the early stage, and then there is the DCG fundings as well. So DCG funding is meant to be that stage B that you're talking about. But I do agree. Beyond MDEC funding, I don't see very much outside other than that.
Yeah, like what I mentioned, we doesn't want to forever relying on grants, right? Because the industry needs to be rolling, and it needs to be self-sufficient, which outside of the MDEC support is what we see a very, very slow or very less thoughts are being given into this industry.
Okay. All right. Let's get to some of the questions from the audience, and then I think I'll probably close up with the finishing questions for you guys. And so let's start. I got one here that says, what happens if halfway through the VC backs out the funding due to disputes with the director or the scriptwriter? Yeah. So anyone want to take this? I guess probably more Zeno's alley, considering it's a scriptwriter and director. Any comments on that?
So the question is, what happened if the VC backs out, right?
Basically, I guess the financer pulls out the funding. So I'm not sure whether they've actually experienced something like this, or they just...
I mean, we've never experienced something like that. But I think before anything, I think, one of the things that we always stress in terms of the new startup or new companies in animation is make sure you have a very good, advisors from legal, from lawyers, right, before you sign on anything. And things like this, it should always be addressed in the documents, where there's a guideline of how each party can, terminate, or how can they come out or exit from an investment. So I guess, always work with good lawyers. If you don't know anyone, you can always go to the customer service and they can ask them if there's any legal support that can be recommended.
Right. So moral of the story, get it contracted. I guess that's the gist of it. And yes, also you can find probably plan backups. I guess that's alternative, or should be having backups in place as well, I guess. Yeah. Right. The next question is, in your view now, what is the next step for the industry? What do you think is needed from government, the commercial industry, and also from agencies such as MDEC or finance. I don't know. You guys have any? Yeah, DC, you want to try this one?
I think letting more people understand about the industry is very important now. At least we can see that the initiative there, and families and parents are no longer like last time saying that why you keep making games, why you play games, this kind of things. People are starting to say that, hey, making games, playing games can earn a living. So, and being in the creative industry is no longer just a passion, but it is a job. This is something that I would say that it's a very, very good good change, and we see that we hope to see this in a bigger scale in the future. It's not only parents seeing that, but also the financial side, I would say, yeah, for the private investors, for the banking side, be more linear and believe in the industry. I would say this is what we are hoping every day. Yeah.
Bankers, is it?
Yeah.
Have you successfully gotten a loan from the bank or a company yet?
I mean, if you want to get a loan for creative industry, you need to have collaterals. Yeah, you need to put in your houses, you need to put in a lot of things or guarantors or stuff, but they won't really look at your real business. They don't really understand, and they don't really care. But we do understand this is financial. This is for them, it is their job.
Would the IPs now, with for Zeno, right? Would the IPs be sufficient collateral for a bank loan, for instance?
Oh, I mean, definitely. I think and these are basically the only collaterals that is used by even private investors, or of course FIs in other countries, right? So I think it's more of how do we bring that and change that landscape in terms of the financial right of funding in Malaysia, where they look at this and say, okay, we have this IP validated, and the projection of, let's say, the next down the years is a revenue that's going to come in. I think that's I guess in the past 5 years we have been using that for the IP in other parts of the world, where we use the IP as a collateral to get the initial funding of the project. Unfortunately, we yet to see that in Malaysia, and we really hope that that's going to change really soon. I mean, like what DC was saying, like, wow, what are you guys doing? Just doing game, mine, right? And even the same thing like in animation, animation is for kids. You're not gonna get, how am I gonna get money? But then if we talk about kids, remember, there's 135 million babies are born each year in the world. 3 years later, all these are your consumers, right? These are the ones that are going to make money for your investment, because the content being consumed as early as 2 years, 3 years old, they are looking at all this content. So the supply, the demand is always going to be there, right? I mean, year after year, in terms of new babies, not those that, in addition to the existing ones. So I hope banks or investors look at this and say, wow, we all should jump into this right now. And I guess that's where the government can also help in terms of, making the blurry thing become a bit more clearer for everyone, right? In terms of how do we invest, how do we make money in terms of investing in animation or game content.
Okay. And again, like DC was talking about just now, there are just so many ways to make money these days. I think even especially for games right now, there's something called the play to earn economy. What you have right now are streamers, people making money from streaming, from watching esports games, and even more recently, with the play to earn economy, with the blockchain games, people are actually earning a couple thousand ringgit a month, right? Playing games and selling stuff within the games. But anyway, so I'm digressing. Let's move on to the next question. And how long? So next question is very specific and it's about Upin Ipin. So I don't know if it's relevant or maybe we can answer this. But how long did Upin Ipin take to be an exportable material like it is now, and making headways into the Indonesian market. Yeah. You have any idea, Zeno?
Well, not specific, but
Yeah.
I believe, right, creators like Lesco Park, when they created Upinipin, they know that they believe in the IP. It's that going to travel not only in Malaysia, but around the world, and it makes such a it's almost like a national icon of Indonesia, in addition to Malaysia, right? So that's I think it's one thing about Malaysia is we have great talent, very creative people, good business people, right? Like Tuan Haji. So I think when we talk early on about market validation, right? It's more about it's not like you create an IP, you believe it's gonna travel, but then it may not if you don't validate it first. So I think that's one of the key learning from Opinity in this case.
Awesome. Okay. Hopefully, it provided some insights to the question. Yeah, I probably one last question for you guys. This, I always want to see, we've covered the past, present, and let's look at the future. Like what, where do you guys see your companies in the next 5 years, right? And how does new technology, particularly, I'm in MDEC, right? And how does the digital economy, right, contribute to these plans? Things like maybe OTT for your case, or virtual reality, virtual production, cloud, and even blockchain for that matter, right? Now there's a lot of these NFTs going on, and selling out at the moment. So how does does any of this factor in, or just in general, like what do you see your companies do in the next 5 years, and how are fundings, right? How is the funding part of these plans? Yeah. Feel free.
So okay, let me try to answer that. Yeah. So how do we see technology plays in the future, and how funding can help us out, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think specifically on the funding, in our studio now, and I believe in many other studios in Malaysia, they have this development team that actually work on new ideas, new IP. For us, we are working on a couple of projects. One of them is a short film that we hope to launch into feature film, for example. So if there's an investor listening out there, and there's a big investment from you guys for this project, I think we're gonna try to make it the next 3 to 5 year project with a significant return. So call me up. But okay, seriously, I think on the other portion, which is technology, right? I think they are definitely change for the better, right? In terms of not only on the production technology, but also on the distribution technology of content. We know now that with the start of 5G, for example, the network, that enables streaming of very high quality content to all the audience. You can watch 4K resolution content on mobile. So I think that is an opportunity for content creators, opportunity for investors to look deeply into this industry, because I think in the future, not only the production, let's say real-time production technology changes the way we produce content, but it is already changing, the way we consume content, and it's only going to continue, right?
Cool. DC, what are your thoughts? Nice one.
Yeah, so for me, I think if you're talking about the scale of our studio in the next few years, I think we'll be still focusing on working on our own IP, because that is very fundamental of what we are doing. But at the same time, we'll be definitely focusing on a lot of solutions, corporate solutions, digital solutions, because we have tried something fun last year, where we combine gamification into corporate solutions, and we found out that it is more fun to use a solution. It is not a very dull kind of UI, all those kind of things anymore. So maybe there's an RPG element in a management system. So you level up as an employee, all those kind of things. So we are investing heavily in these kind of things because we all know it's COVID, it's a pandemic, and it changed everyone's behavior. We are talking about digitalizations. We can see that a lot of new streamers came out. A lot of new streamers came out every day. So why? Because there is opportunity. Why? Because at least you are able to make a living, because you get tips from different people in the world. When you are doing contents, brands or IPs are giving you sponsorships to make their contents, to play their games and stuff like that. So we can see that moving forward, definitely digitalization is one of the most important aspect, or one of the biggest change that we will see in the next few years. Because previously, when we talk to people about games, about digitalization, people are like, okay, wow, cool, all right, that's good. But now during the pandemic, when we talk to these people again, they were like, okay, how do we do that? How do we digitalize our studio, our company? How do we streamline our pipeline? All these kind of things suddenly came up. So I would say that the pandemic has hastened up the whole process of people adapting to digitalization. So so moving forward, I think we hope to see more funds from the like what Zeno said, more funds that's supporting the digitalization. In fact, we can see certain digitalization grants from the government as well, which is a very good start, because a lot of companies might not know how, and we see a lot of traditional companies are still using papers and pens, filing their stuff, which I think hopefully in the future, not only us, but the whole industry can move forward in a more digital way, so that we keep things simple, but at the same time more efficient, I would say.
Okay, guys. It was really, really, have great conversation. I wish I could, carry this on more. Hopefully we can do a tete session, one of these days after this. And so I'd like to thank both our panelists, DC and Zeno, for contributing today. And hopefully the audience and everyone else got some valuable insights from this conversation. Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Mr. Mohan, for that very interesting discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, we shall now take a break from our sessions and resume at 2 p.m. See you in a bit.